Now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce the winning juror this year, Professor Tammy Ho Ming from Chinese Baptist University. She's Associate Professor of Literature there. She's also an editor, a translator, a poet. She works across many fields. And as you've heard from my colleague Bo Kong, it was a very tight field. Some of the greatest poets like Bei Dao were in this work, or in this year's nominations. But you will hear what those jurors heard in Tammy's words, and how and why Xixi is this year's winner. So please welcome Tammy Ho.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. I'm very grateful to be here. I'm going to say a few words about Xixi, who is the winner of 2019 of the 2019 Newman Prize for Chinese Literature. Born in Shanghai in 1937, Xixi's writing career has spanned 6 decades, and she is considered, justifiably so, a cult Chinese writer. Xixi is an extremely versatile wordsmith who builds worlds of reality and fantasy in a number of capacities. As poet, novelist, essayist, columnist, translator, screenwriter, editor, dollmaker, and more. Her prose books, including My City, A Hong Kong Story, 我城, Marvels of a Floating City, 浮城之意, Mourning for the Breast, 哀悼乳房, Flying Carpet, 飛氈, and her short stories, notably A Girl Like Me, 像我這樣的一個女子, are admired by fans and followers and continue to win and fascinate new readers. It is Xixi's poetry, written mainly between 1959 and 1999 and published in her second collection, The Selected Poems of Xixi, 西西詩集, that captures my attention the most. I'm drawn to the ostensibly quiet, unremarkable stories of Hong Kong life that her poems portray, celebrate, and at times critique. These vignettes might depict the experience of dining in a fast food restaurant, a visit to a neighborhood supermarket, window shopping in one of the city's countless malls, a consultation with a doctor in a public hospital, or buying flowers in the market. Together, these works document a slice of this uniquely global and idiosyncratic city's history. Though born in Shanghai, Xixi came to Hong Kong with her family at the age of 12 in 1950. She belongs to the first generation of Chinese authors writing in colonial Hong Kong, and as such, her works reflect life as it was in the city in the days both before and after Hong Kong's sovereignty was handed over to China in 1997. This might suggest that Xixi's poems are in a way time-stamped, that they bear the ineffable imprint of the moment of their composition. But they also paradoxically have a timeless quality, and their concerns are still highly relevant to the Hong Kong of today. You could say the stories of Hong Kong's little citizens, 小市民, living out their day-to-day existences are fundamentally unchanged despite the change of governments. Tai Chi practitioners, whom Xixi writes about, still turn out en masse in the parks early in the morning. There are still authoritarian teachers in schools scolding students. Still, teenagers who don't go home at night. There is probably even still a letter writer in an obscure corner in the city who listens attentively to an illiterate client and helps them pen the perfect letter to distant relatives or city officials. There is a certain subtle rebelliousness in Xixi's poetry. I think she is a feminist anti-colonial, anti-urban, and she is political. Though not dogmatic, her politics being divulged in gentle measures, the ideas suggested rather than forced upon the reader. The poem Many a Lady, 許多女子, defies the common belief that young women must be in want of a Prince Charming. And another poem, excerpts from a feminist dictionary, 女性主義字典抽樣, insists on adding an S in front of words that begin with he. In Pigeon Walk, 鴿子岩, a man dances joyously at the end of British rule in Hong Kong. In modern architecture, 現代建築, CC compares Hong Kong's high-rise skyline to gravestones in a cemetery without the protection of a guardian angel. While in another poem, she associates the air in air-conditioned shopping malls with recycled exhaust fumes. The poem June, 6月, written in July 1989, does not mention the Tiananmen Square massacre of the month before, but it alludes to a square. The horror of the massacre is abundantly displayed in the willful omission of details. CC's poetry looks beyond Hong Kong and takes the readers on a journey to places near and far. Her poems engage closely with the literature, art, culture, and social issues of the whole world. She is sometimes in dialogue with Chinese poets such as Lei Ba, Dou Fu, Dou Mu, Li Xiangyan, and Western writers such as Yeats, Mary Shelley, Gary Snyder. She is comfortable writing in nursery rhymes and various poetic forms. This eclectic mixture mirrors the global outlook of Hong Kong in absorbing influences from a variety of sources. Firmly rooted in the city, CC is in touch, intellectually and aesthetically, with the rest of the world. CC's poetry is also often described as imaginative and philosophical and highly imagistic, like verbal paintings with words. In one poem, she wishes to become a water heater that can offer warmth to her mother. In another, she imagines transforming into a kangaroo, forever carrying around baggage that cannot be let go of or forgotten. And in yet another poem, a bone of a silky hand, 竹絲雞, is turned into a pen and dipped in ink to write a thank you letter to a friend who sent a chicken. In her introduction to CC's Not Written Words, 不是文字, translator and my friend Jennifer Feely notes that CC's, and I quote her, consistently uses plain and understated language, yet her poetry is nevertheless provocative and philosophical. Her early poems are light, whimsical, and abundant in musicality and wordplay, unquote. Reading CC's poems might be described as transformative, as one reads not only for the meaning, but also the very brilliance of the language and the boundless possibilities it evokes. But while her linguistic inventiveness might be in large part underpinned by the sounds and rhythms of the Chinese language, translating this inventiveness into other languages and keeping as much as possible of it intact is a stern challenge. Jennifer's translations in Not Written Words demonstrate that in the hands of an extremely skilled translator, the principles of CC's wondrous and witty usage of language can transcend linguistic and cultural barriers and breed new creativity in other languages. Hong Kong literature has for long been relegated to a secondary position. Or even worse, it is as though the city is incapable of producing significant literary works and writers of note. Hong Kong poetry is to many perhaps an even more abstract concept. Poetry writing in Hong Kong is at the margins of the Sinophone world, and this marginality begins with the city itself. The late great Hong Kong poet Leung Bing-guan, for example, once said, and I quote him, To the Chinese from mainland China or from Taiwan, Hong Kong is foreign. It's always the other, the marginal spot that is usually ignored in general discussion, unquote. That is to say, even to our Chinese-speaking neighbors, Hong Kong, often considered to be culturally and politically subordinate to China, is the marginal spot. The city's identity is elided, pushed as it is to the Chinese periphery. Cici's poetry, at times whimsical and at times serious, speaks to the character of the city and its people. Cici's poem also demonstrates how stories of a city can be told through allegories, fairy tales, narratives that are at first glance insignificant, instead of grand statements. Feminine, tender, witty, observant, and capable of tugging at the heartstrings, Cici's poetry reminds us Hong Kong poetry should not be ignored in any discussion. Thank you.